Gender Stereotyping and Conflict Resolution by Jennifer Stege, Psych 499. Gender is a key aspect of identity that is shaped not only by biology, but also by societal and cultural norms that show one how to act properly. One might recognize some of these rules through popular sayings such as, "A lady always crosses her legs," or "Real men never cry." Both of these are norms that society says are not to be violated, and are examples of cultural pressures towards individuals to behave their gender. In the past, the consequences for violating these rules were swift and harsh. Joan of Arc, for instance, was condemned to burn partially due to the fact that she wore men's clothes. Nowadays, gender norms still play a big part in how men and women act, how they perceive each other, and even how they are supposed to handle conflict. This presentation will look at how the stereotypes produced from these gender-appropriate norms cause harmful attitudes and interpersonal conflicts in the workplaces. It will also briefly examine programs that can be used to override these stereotypes. The perception of how men resolve conflict. There's always been a macho gender role that men are expected to live up to, particularly men in power. The traits that have come along with this macho orientation are usually stereotyped as strength and aggression. The model of the macho leader does not usually have a collaborative or democratic approach to it. The image that is conjured when one thinks of a macho man is not someone who sits around and asks for other people's opinions, but rather the image of a general making the decisions for his army, the purpose of this fight being to win. The idea of a macho man can be found in the way that young men describe ideal adulthood. For example, when determining what traits they think that a real man should possess, adolescent white males in South Africa chose traits of dominance, power, strength, and toughness. Agentic or hierarchical methods of management. This perception also carries into the corporate world, where men generally are seen making unilateral decisions and having a more agentic and hierarchical orientation towards conflict resolution that emphasizes the needs of the self over the needs of the subordinate. This need of the self translates to an independent, ambitious, and competitive style of conflict negotiation. This is the stereotypical gender normative behavior expected of men in conflict. This method of leadership relies more on authority and can be summed up in the phrase, "because I said so." This type of management typically addresses the facts of the situation rather than feelings. Apologies from the offender are also usually not taken into account. Men have also been typically shown to express more anger within a conflict than their female counterparts. Conversely, men are also associated with an avoidant attitude, wherein they avoid or ignore conflicts going on around them in hopes that they will resolve themselves without their intervention. A study done by Deborah Weider Hatfield and John Hatfield in 1996 demonstrates the consequences of relying on a stereotypically male method of conflict resolution in the workplace. In this study, managers and subordinates were surveyed about job satisfaction as well as management styles. Researchers found that there was a significant correlation between a dominant or avoidant style of management and employee satisfaction. Specifically, the study found that when supervisors employed a dominant, low feelings, high authoritarian, or avoiding conflict altogether style of conflict resolution, both the employee's perception of the handling of said conflict as well as their job satisfaction were markedly lower than those whose managers take a more collaborative approach to resolving conflict. Cultural origins of male methods of conflict resolution. The phrase that we mentioned earlier, "real men don't cry," is a cliché that has been used many times in promoting the stereotype that it is not okay for men to express their feelings. If we consider the developmental trajectory of social scripts as a series of transactional interactions, then we could argue that the pervasive nature of the "men don't cry" cliché is reinforced through socialization with other male peers who receive this same message. This cliché could partially explain both why men are more reluctant to consider feelings as much as women are, and why they typically report having less intimate same-sex friendships. This lack of cultural support for the concept of empathy may damage men's ability to be effective mediators during a crisis. A successful mediation and conflict resolution rely greatly on mutual respect existing between the two parties. Only when both parties respect each other and take the other group's needs into consideration can a true and lasting resolution take place. Is the autocratic management style a result of male privilege? However, this mutual respect is not typical when there is an imbalance of power between two groups. When this happens, autocratic management styles wherein the needs of the less powerful group are not taken into consideration, typically take over. Researchers argue that this unquestioned management style is frequently used to keep the in-group in power and the out-group subservient. An example of this can be seen in the traditionally male-dominated science and technology sector. In a report in the Harvard Business Review, women were said to be leaving the fields increasingly, due not only to a hostile work environment, but also to an unsure path forward. Notably, 40% of women surveyed felt that they were stuck in their current positions, and nearly 63% surveyed had experienced sexual harassment at their job. This is an example of the social dominance orientation, wherein a more powerful group with privilege actively limits the opportunities of another group in order to maintain the superiority and opportunities typically afforded to them. As this glass ceiling is breaking and more women are getting into positions of power, researchers are finding that women are adopting a more dominant and typically male style of conflict resolution. This indicates that perhaps autocratic and directive management styles may not come exclusively from gender roles, but rather from the nature of power as a means of distancing themselves from subordinates and preserving their own power in the hierarchy. Is autocratic rule in corporations a thing of the past? This distant management style is being gradually eroded as time progresses. Previously, managers were unquestioned. However, that is changing as the new generation of millennials in the United States is making their voices heard about everything from the tasks they're expected to complete to the salaries they receive. This new attitude has caused notable tensions among managers from different generations. However, many companies are now trying to adapt to their expectations, especially since millennials are expected to make up an estimated 50% of the workforce by 2020. Along with this new generation's desire to question the old, corporations are also gradually realizing that the old dominant authoritarian methods of conflict resolutions lead to less employee satisfaction and more turnover. Studies done in China recently support this link, as subordinates surveyed reported that those who rated their manager's style as dominant or avoidant are less satisfied with their jobs and more likely to leave them. More and more, the importance of trust and empathy are being recognized in maintaining a happy workplace and a content workforce. Traditional views of womanhood. Just as men have certain gender roles that society endorses, so too do women have a script when managing conflict. One advantage for women as potential mediators is that they are generally encouraged to express feelings and generally describe their friendships as more intimate than those of men. Also, women are known to be more collaborative and are more likely to ask for others' opinions in making decisions. Finally, studies have shown that women are better able to read nonverbal body language. All of these stereotypically feminine attributes mirror effective aspects of conflict resolution such as collaboration and empathy. All these advantages correlate to women being extremely effective mediators and as a result have the potential to be extremely effective managers. Indeed, in one survey, women who had less or equal power as the disputants in the workplace were found to mediate conflict in a more satisfactory way by both parties, as well the solutions that they came up with were found to be longer lasting. However, women are also associated with counterproductive behaviors when faced with conflict. One such stereotype is the woman-hating female. This woman is characterized as a backstabber who actively sabotages other women in order to climb the corporate ladder. The stereotype is contrary to how society wishes women to behave at work and goes against society's ideals for women as kind and gentle mother figures. Indeed, aggressive and ambitious behaviors that would be applauded in men are often disparaged in women. In fact, women who do achieve career advancement, even when rated confident, are rated lower on traditionally feminine traits such as warmth by both the men and women surveyed. This rating implies that in order to succeed in the traditionally corporate world, people believe that a woman sacrifices traditionally feminine traits. However, as previously discussed, these feminine traits are also related to positive conflict resolution style. Women as backstabbers. The negative stereotype of women as backstabbers is further supported through the unilateral approach to conflict resolution that usually characterizes women-on-women conflicts in the workplace. An example of this in action would be a teacher who is upset by the noise in another's classroom but may go to the principal instead of talking directly with the teacher making the noise. This method usually does not involve direct confrontation and instead invokes the interference of an outside authority to resolve conflict. Unsurprisingly, the idea of indirectly solving the problem by going behind someone's back can create negative feelings in the workplace. Among young adult women surveyed, they report using unilateral strategies 46% of the time when dealing with workplace conflicts. This reliance on indirect methods of confrontation has led to the stereotype that the majority of women actively sabotage each other. This tendency has even been given a name, the Queen Bee Syndrome. This is a derogatory term for the women who ascend the corporate ladder and then seek to sabotage other women who could threaten their power or place in the rank. An example of this idea of women as enemies of each other can be even seen through classic fairy tales such as Snow White, where the evil queen tries to kill Snow White because she is jealous of her youth and beauty. Although there is evidence of instances of this happening, as chronicled in Eli's 1994 ethnography of female lawyers, there is no evidence that this takes place as widely as one believes. In fact, the sabotaging attitude in Eli studies can also be traced to a scarcity of opportunity in a male-dominated world, as well as a competitive atmosphere. Not surprisingly, these two factors created animosity between women. A recent study also found that we are predisposed to view interpersonal conflicts between two women as more problematic than between two men. In the study, participants were given nearly identical scenarios of conflicts between coworkers, one between two women, one between two men, and one between a man and a woman. Scenarios were changed minutely, however, the types of conflicts as well as the resolution that ended each scenario were identical, i.e. direct versus indirect methods, types of offenses, etc. Respondents were then asked to rate how problematic the encounter was, both for the people involved as well as the company. Across the board, the situation between the two females was rated as being the most problematic. This suggests that those instances of conflict that do exist between women in the workplace may be dramatized and problematized to such a degree that it creates and promulgates the unhealthy stereotype of the catty woman as the norm in workplace politics. This is not only detrimental to how women are perceived professionally, but also how they are perceived as potential leaders. One would not want a backstabber or a manipulative boss, would they? Cultural origins of female methods of conflict resolution. As mentioned earlier, cultural norms that separate men and women gender stereotypes permit the use and expression of feelings in women more frequently than it does in men. This greater facility and ability to express feelings also leads to a greater sense of empathy. As in men, this empathy amongst women is thought to be nurtured from an early age and is encouraged and reinforced through the systematic socialization with other females. This can be seen through the intimate relationships the females have amongst each other. In these intimate friendships, women are more likely to share their feelings and experiences and generally report having deeper relationships with their female friends as a result. Historically, women have also been marginalized and made to feel unequal to their male counterparts. It is interesting to note that less powered groups have, by necessity, usually resorted to indirect methods of conflict resolution as a result of being afraid of provoking hostility from higher power groups. Thus, it could be argued that women use methods of indirect conflict resolution as a result of having less leverage than their male counterparts in confrontations. For example, a woman may be less likely to openly conflict with a peer and risk her status and/or reputation than a man who is more secure in his power and status. The scarcity of powerful positions for women is reinforced by the fact that women make up half of the workforce of companies but occupy less than 15% of executive positions. Added to this insecurity is the sense that conflicts with female coworkers are generally viewed more negatively due to cultural stereotypes, and it is no wonder that women may feel more comfortable dealing with conflict through an intermediary. This tendency towards indirect confrontation when subordinate, along with the adoption of traditionally male traits when given higher status, point to the fact that the traditional ideas of women as sneaky backstabbers may be the product not of their gender, but rather the lower social positions to which their gender has typically relegated them. The problem with stereotypes as they are now for women. Women are at a disadvantage in the workplace because they are less likely to be perceived as good leaders, as defined by the macho decider, and the drama of their interpersonal encounters with coworkers are likely to be scrutinized more closely. This leads to a public perception problem that limits the opportunities that women have access to and undermines their authorities as leaders. And in fact, this idea is so pervasive that even other women do not believe that their gender is right for power. For example, Cheryl Rios, the CEO of Go Marketing, went on record saying that a woman shouldn't be president. This backlash against women as incapable of decisive leadership may be another factor of why women are seen to shed typical female traits, such as empathy and warmth in their reach for power, and are perceived more negatively when they do exercise these male methods of directive leadership. Men are also at a disadvantage from these stereotypes as autocratic and agentic methods of management are not in sync with the times and are being shown as an increasing liability for companies as the new generation is prepared to question their authority. As well, limiting or inhibiting a man's ability to express feelings limits his ability as a leader and mediator of conflict. This is increasingly important in companies as it is estimated that 20% of a manager's time is spent mediating conflicts between employees. The problem with the current stereotypes for all. The problem with these gender stereotypes, however, goes beyond just promoting inequality. It goes to the heart of what people feel make a good leader. That is, the absence of positive feminine qualities such as empathy and collaborative decision-making, which are directly associated with effective and peaceful conflict resolution. The macho man is seen as the epitome of leadership by many. However, if he is unable to express his emotions or take into account the ideas and experience of others, then the only method of resolving conflict becomes that of force or coercion. Meanwhile, the female is supposed to possess many qualities that would make a perfect leader, such as empathy and collaborative decision-making, but is still not as well respected as a man in this position due to old cultural stereotypes. Thus, gender stereotypes limit not only individuals, but also inhibit the success of the leaders of companies and countries by forcing individuals to behave as either a male or female should, when the complete picture of a mediator and leader should have traits associated with both genders. The solution: eliminating these stereotypes is incredibly difficult to do, as they are firmly embedded in our culture and society. However, carefully structured leadership training such as role-playing exercises have been shown to help people acquire and express empathy in appropriate ways during mediation. Additionally, greater gender integration through company outings and co-ed teams could help women and men of different social standings within the company start to see each other not just as competitors and bosses, but also as human beings. For example, if a man critical of his female supervisor is able to bond with her, this could cut down on feelings of mistrust of her abilities as a supervisor. Additionally, interactions with other genders have been shown to encourage opposite gender traits, which could help others burst out of their culturally and socially mandated gender roles. It is in the best interest of companies not to limit or label their leaders based on their gender, but rather to educate them in all of the different ways that they can make them into great leaders.